Hey guys, and welcome back to another video. In this video, I'm going to be talking about my Southeast Asia nonfiction reading list. Some of you may know that I do have to cover Southeast Asia for my day job, and knowing the history and culture is really important, in my opinion, for doing my job well. So while I've read a lot of Singaporean fiction and some nonfiction as well, since starting this job earlier this year, I've been wanting to read more about Southeast Asia just to have a better foundation and a better understanding. It's definitely a journey. I would love any recommendations for books either about the region or about specific countries. I really wanted to start out with kind of an overview, but I think I misfired and maybe didn't do enough research. I'm also not sure if there's actually that much out there. So I'm going to start off by doing a quick review of this book, Blood and Silk, and then I'm going to walk you through a bunch of other books that I've bought. I am on a book buying ban, but I did pick up a lot of these on my travels, and when you're in Indonesia and you buy a nonfiction book about Indonesia, it just feels like it's not real money, and it's fine. So you may have seen some of my reading vlog about this book. I finally finished it. This is a nonfiction book written by Michael Vatikiotis. It's a little bit different because it's also somewhat of a memoir. He basically was a journalist in Asia for 30 years. He wrote for the Far Eastern Economic Review. He was based in Jakarta, Manila, Hong Kong. As you'll know from my other video, I wasn't a really big fan. I feel that the lens really felt like a Western journalist, and he just was very focused on a handful of topics, namely like religious violence, war, conflict, which I didn't really... Okay, I guess it is my bad because it's called Power and Conflict in Modern Southeast Asia, but I just felt like his treatment of the topics were very much like democracy good, dictatorship bad, without really going much deeper. And a lot of times we do have a dictatorship or an authoritarian style of government in a lot of these former colonies or places that were occupied or colonized because of the oppressive forces and the negative effect that that left behind. So I just find it a bit one-dimensional to almost like criticize or lament the fact that there is maybe more conflict or more authoritarian modes of governance in countries where it is directly, literally the fault of the US or Great Britain or the UK. So I was a little bit like annoyed by the book for the first several chapters. I also think that the tone was a little bit off. It was kind of like part self-congratulatory memoir where he would tell these stories where I thought he was only telling the story because it was like a famous person he met or he thought it made him look good or like well connected, but it didn't really fit into the overall flow of the chapter. So in general, I think I was expecting something that would be a lot more structured and a lot more analytical, and sometimes it would delve into that style of memoir instead, and then I wasn't as satisfied. I am glad that I stuck it through and read the whole thing though, because I did like the last chapter the best, which is called The Road Ahead, where he tried to make some predictions. And I also feel like having that structure of having to go through and say something insightful about each of the markets or each of the areas he was focused on did give him a bit of a structure to grab onto, which was very helpful for his writing. And then I also liked the chapter on China, the dragon apparent, just because I felt like I learned something new. The rest of the book is a bit spotty in its coverage. There's like a really big focus on Myanmar and Thailand and Vietnam, of course Indonesia, but not too much on Malaysia or Singapore or the Philippines, like just maybe 20 pages on the Philippines. So this is an issue that I'm running into that I am going to solve by just reading a lot of stuff, but I was hoping to get more of an overview, a more even treatment of the region. There's also a lot of issues like migrant work, climate change, just a whole bunch of different dynamics that I think make this region so interesting and in my opinion, there are a lot of like global issues that when you look at them through the lens of Southeast Asia, there's like a really fascinating intersection. But this book is not the most current book. It came out in 2017 was the first publication. So obviously like so much has changed since then. Like this doesn't even touch like the rise of Trump or social media, but that's fine. I'm not judging it on that. So I think I'll just try to find something better, which is basically what has spurred my book buying spree. So the first book that I bought as a direct result of not being happy with Blood and Silk is a literal primer. It's an introductory history to Southeast Asia by Milton Osborne. Milton Osborne has been a resident and fascinated observer of Southeast Asia for decades. So I hope that this will be more of what I'm looking for. A little bit more methodical, a little bit more comprehensive. I hope it's not boring though. But I also do know that the study of Southeast Asian studies really became a thing in the US like during the Cold War as like a geopolitical and military driven area of expertise. And so that does kind of explain why so many of the experts have that lens and really care about this region through that lens. But for me, I don't really care about US soft power or foreign policy. So I'm really more trying to understand the countries for like what they are and just like learn interesting things about them. So that's one bias I think I'm gonna have to overcorrect for. The Jakarta method is very well known now. I think people that are not interested in Southeast Asia maybe even have read this. So I do want to know more about like the history of communism in the region. This I think is specifically about the role that the US government played in helping the Indonesian military conduct the massacre against communists in the 70s or in 1965 specifically. So I wanted to read this just because I'm always interested in things that like break through to the mainstream. This was actually recommended to me by my country manager in Thailand from my previous job, and I'm already in a new job, so I need to get on it. But I saw it in the airport in Jakarta, and so then I bought it. The next thing I got at the airport in Jakarta, which is reminding me, I did do a haul of these books, but I haven't touched them since, this is actually fiction. This is People from Bloomington. I thought this would be fun because it's written by an Indonesian who spent some time in the Midwest in the US and then wrote about it. So I thought that that would be kind of an interesting concept. Then this book I bought in direct response to being annoyed with Blood and Silk. This is The Long Shadow of the 19th Century. I saw this at the library and then I just decided I had to own it, so then I bought it. It's critical essays on colonial Orientalism in Southeast Asia. I am so excited for this. So basically the structure of this book is it takes different topics that show how colonialism still persists today or the impact of colonialism, and then parses them using like primary sources and doing like an analytical study. So for example, one of the chapters or one of the essays is about travel logs, which I think is so interesting because I have read one by a British woman where she just wrote about like her daily life as part of like she was maybe part of the British colonial social group in Singapore. And the topic of the essay is Innocence Abroad, the erasure of the question of race and power in contemporary feminist and nostalgic travelogues. So I thought that sounded really interesting. Another one that I thought was interesting was like the effect of Stanford Raffles' map of Java and the epistemology of empire. So this is basically looking at primary texts and like decolonizing them, which is, I don't know, it just felt like so refreshing after having read this like white guy's like recounting of his life in living in Southeast Asia. I mean, I'm being very disparaging of Blood and Silk. I actually would recommend it if you want something that's like very superficial, very high level overview. It's kind of a slog, but like if you get through it, it will give you like a good foundation. But I'm hoping after I read a bunch of other stuff, I'll have something better to recommend. And then I was thinking of applying for a master's. So I was doing a bunch of research, a master's in Southeast Asian studies. So I was doing a bunch of research, and most likely my topic would be on Singapore just because I don't speak any of the other languages in this region and it's where I live. But I ended up not applying, but I still ended up buying books. So one of my favorite authors if you have been with me since the early days, I did do a book review of Liberalism Disavowed, which is in my top 5 books I recommend about Singapore. If anyone's looking for a Singapore reading list, I always recommend Liberalism Disavowed. I think it's a fantastic work, especially for Americans. It helps you understand how, even though Singapore is very capitalism and meritocracy based, there are still modes and pillars of social welfare and socialism that exist here. Anyway, Chua Beng-hua is the author. He's a professor at NUS. This is called Public Subsidy, Private Accumulation, the Political Economy of Singapore's Public Housing. I'm really excited to read this because I've been wanting to learn more about the actual mechanics of public housing in Singapore. And I also think it's just fascinating because there are definitely capitalist principles to how the system works. And the government does want like private property to be a thing, but then obviously it is public housing. So I'm very excited to read this. And it's kind of short, but it's going to be academic, so it might be kind of hard to get through. And then if it's good, I'll recommend it to my friend who's also very interested in public housing in Singapore. Then I bought this big ass book, Why Not? Thinking About Singapore's Tomorrow. It's edited by Margaret Thomas, who is the founder of AWARE, which is a women's rights organization in Singapore, and then also Kanwaljit Sun, who I do not know who that is. But this is a collection of like more alternative voices and just imagining what Singapore could be. I think that's a really important exercise because a lot of Singapore's history to date has been very centered on this narrative of survival and being under constant attack or risk and being practical. And so I think something that's very important for the nation to do as a whole is just like to imagine what it would be like to have, you know, a society that isn't just solely focused on those practical matters, but also cares about other things. And I think the contributions will come from a wide array of civil society and other alternative voices. So I am interested in reading this. I've read a few different books in that vein. For example, the Naysayers Book Club is like that. There's a couple others. When I first started this channel, I read a lot of those types of books, and then it just kept being like the same thing over and over, so I kind of stopped. I would still say that in my top 5 books about Singapore recommendations, I would just read Cherry and George. He's like the OG. He's the best. He's such a good writer. Air Conditioned Nation, that volume of essays, I think it's still relevant today. He also did like a revisited version, so if you want to check out like the most updated version, you could look for that. Okay, 2 more, because so far everything is just Indonesia and Singapore. I mean, it's going to take me so long to read all of this, so this will probably be like for the next year. But I am almost done with this. I was in Manila the other day for work, and I started Maria Ressa's memoir. This is such a good memoir. I think I just got distracted and read something else, but I'm about halfway through. She's so inspiring. Like, I just love her so much, and I feel like there's so much like hypocrisy in the world, and she is one of the few people, at least from reading this and from what I know, who like really speaks truth to power and like is actually authentically trying to live like a good life. I don't know. It's How to Stand Up to a Dictator, and she talks about her struggles with her independent media, Rappler, and what she encountered during the Duterte administration. Okay, the last one is Peninsula, A Story of Malaysia. My Malaysia knowledge is severely lacking. I only know like contemporary news. I don't really know a lot of like the historical or, the political background. I also think a big gap in my knowledge is like the role of Islam in the region. Having come from China, I'm much more of like a China hand and someone who thinks about things from that point of view. But I still need to figure out what I can read to bolster that. I also got a recommendation. I told someone that I want to know more about like the role of the military in Singapore, so I got a recommendation for a book on that, but it turned out to be like a very dense nonfiction textbook, so I'm not gonna buy it. I'm just gonna wait. I need to read all this before I buy more stuff. But this is a personal memoir. This is not nonfiction, and it's by Remin Rashid, and I think I bought this years ago, but then the other day, one of my friends was visiting and saw this on my bookshelf and said, oh, he's an amazing author, what do you think? And I had to admit that I haven't even read it yet, so I want to read this to make sure I have something representing Malaysia, and then I'm still missing like Vietnam, Thailand, In Blood and Silk, I learned a little bit about the role of the royal family in Thailand, and it just seems very opaque and confusing, so I definitely have to like read more to understand that. And then of course there's Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, and then happy ASEAN 13th ASEAN Summit, because now Timor-Leste is part of ASEAN, but I'm going to hold off before I find any books about Timor-Leste. So thanks for listening. I don't know how interested people are in Southeast Asia, but this is my stack of books that I own. I already spent money on them, so I need to just read them because they're sitting on my shelf. There's probably a lot of other stuff back there as well, but this is just what I've bought most recently and feel guilty for not reading. Thanks for watching this video, guys, and I'll catch you in the next one.